One other thing. Okay, thank you for joining me again. We're on the first Amud of Masechet Yuma. We just started this Masechet last week, and we did the Mishnah, and perhaps we did a little bit of the Gemara as well. And we're going to take it on from there. Just before we do so, I think we reached somewhere towards the beginning, middle of the Amud, Beit Amud Aleph, very much in the middle of the sheet. So the Mishnah was dealing with a ritual that took place before the Yom Kippurim each year, and that was that there was a 7-day period of separation of the Kohen Gadol. The Kohen Gadol was forced to leave home, if you like, and to take up a dirah on the Beis HaMikdash precinct. And he was placed into a place called Lishkas Parhedrin, where he spent the 7 days before Yom HaKippurim each year. So he lost this week. He was in isolation, essentially, for those 7 days. Not in complete isolation, because the other Kohanim were around him. The Sanhedrin were next door as well. But he was separated from his wife, he was separated from his family, and from his community outside the Beis HaMikdash. And during this period, there would be an attempt to keep him as tahor as possible, as pure as possible, that he shouldn't make contact with anything which would make him contract tumah. If he contracted tumah, then he may not be able to carry out the ritual of the Yom Kippur Avodah, and that was a very complex and demanding ritual. And there was every attempt made to make sure he remained tahor, and that's one of the reasons he was kept in the Beis HaMikdash, because in the Beis HaMikdash there was a need for tahara in general. The other thing is, we'll see much later on in the Gemara, that during that time he was also primed with his information and told to rehearse what he would have to do on the Yom Kippur ceremony, because he would be busy most of the day going from A to B to C with all the ritual of the day being in his hands. He would have no Kohanim to help him out. This is essentially a one-man band on Yom Kippur, the only day of the year where the Kohen Gadol himself was the only Kohen allowed to do any of the Avodah. So he was placed in this room in the Lishkas Parhedrin. And the Mishnah told us other things as well, but we won't go into some of those other details. When we started the Gemara, Tanan Hossam, last week, the Gemara brought us an extract of another Mishnah, which starts off in a very similar way, but it's a completely different halacha. But it involves another 7-day separation period in advance of another ritual. And this concerns the Kohen who's about to prepare the Parah Adumah. Parah Adumah, from which the ashes are taken, and those ashes are mixed with water and sprinkled over someone who's contracted Tumat Meis, someone who has been in contact with a dead body, and needs to go through a sprinkling process as well as a 7-day purification period. That Parah Adumah was vital, and because we don't have Parah Adumah today, we're all Tomei Meis. There's nothing we can do. We do not have the Parah Adumah. The Parah Adumah needed to be prepared, the red heifer ashes, every now and again when the ashes had run out, if you like, the store of red heifer ashes had run out, only a small amount being needed each time, but over a period of time all of it would be used up. They would have to find another red heifer. And you remember all the wonderful stories about finding a Parah Adumah. These were very, very unusual animals. And every now and again you see a story in the Israeli newspapers of someone locating a red heifer, sometimes not in Eretz Israel, but in Argentina and places like that, in Venezuela, and they're ready to have it imported over here. So if the Beis HaMikdash is rebuilt, then immediately we will be able to have a fully a pure red heifer without any other color tones, one that hasn't been used to schlepp or anything. There are various requirements for a Parah Adumah. And when a Parah Adumah is located and it is needed to prepare some more, there is a whole ritual. The Kohen who is preparing it, not necessarily the Kohen Gadol, will go up to Har HaZeisim, and on the Mount of Olives, the preparation of the Parah Adumah would take place. The Mishnah in Parah which the Gemara introduces us to over here, says that the Kohen who is going to prepare the Pora Aduma ashes for in preparation for that Pora Aduma ceremony, the burning of the Pora Aduma and the mixing with the water, he would also need a 7-day period of prior separation. He was also entitled to be pure and to be kept away from society. And he was put in a different room. Strangely enough, the Mishnah in Porah told us it was a room called the Lishkas Beis Even, the stone room, where stone utensils were kept. That's where he would be for the 7-day period. The Gemara also told us some very interesting things, that this particular Kohen who was going to prepare it was actually made Tomei deliberately in a very ironic and perverse process, whereby he was Tomei for the day. He was going to make the preparation of the Pora Aduma, ironically, but he would go to the mikveh before he prepared those ashes. So he would be partially free of his tumah. And I told you that for certain tumot, there was a 2-stage purification process. The Kohen who was Tomei, not a case of Tomei Mace, but Tomei through a sheretz or some other source of Tum'ah, would be able to go through stage 1 of the preparation on that very same day by going into the mikveh. When he comes out, he is stage 1 tahor. He's only stage 2 tahor, which would enable him to eat kodshim when nightfall comes. However, the Pharisees, the Perushim, our lot, understood the psukim to allow a Kohen who is only stage 1 pure to prepare the ashes of the Pora Aduma, whereas the Tzedukim, the Sadducees, said that he would need to be stage 2 pure before he could be allowed to prepare the Pora Aduma. Ironically, in order to show up that Tzedukim is being wrong, the Pharisees instructed the Kohen and enabled the Kohen to become part 1 tahar only on a tumah which they imposed on him, even though he himself had been tahar before that imposition. And then he would perform the Pora Aduma preparation ceremony simply to demonstrate to the Tzedukim that the Perushim make the halacha and not the Tzedukim, that the Pharisees make the halacha and not the Sadducees. So they would do this thing, which was really like a finger up the nose of the Sadducees. So we'll see later on, there was a great battle during that period that we're talking about over here during Second Beis HaMikdash times between Perushim and Tzedukim in terms of asserting authority. The Perushim were really the rabbis of the people. The people accepted them. The Tzedukim were very much aristocrats who were somewhat Hellenized. And they accepted Torah B'Ksav, not Torah Baal Peh, and therefore they learned things differently. And Chazal tried at every opportunity where their interpretation differed from those of the Sadducees to ensure that the people were made aware that it was the Pharisaic interpretation which was the one that would drive halacha and not the Sadducean interpretation. And therefore this irony of making the Kohen who's going to prepare the Pora Aduma, Tomei, and then purifying him only to stage 1, and then asking him to perform this preparation of the Pora Aduma. In any case, that is what we learned last week. It was an interesting tangent. But in principle, where we are now is that our own Mishnah that dealt with a 7-day separation prior to Yom Kippur was one situation where a 7-day separation process was required prior to Yom Kippur, the Kohen Gadol prior to Yom Kippur. And the Mishnah in Porah told us an identical halacha, 7-day separation period for the Kohen who's going to prepare the Pora Aduma. And so far, we haven't seen why a 7-day separation period would be needed. I explained to you that it was common sense. You wanted to make sure that he's tahor, etc. But the Gemara is going to actually bring verses to show that a 7-day preparation period is needed, both for the Pora Aduma preparation and from Yom Kippurim. Just before we do that, we're going to pick up on the Gemara that deals with a slightly earlier detail on the Pora Aduma. The Mishnah the Gemara brought at the beginning in relation to the Pora Aduma was that the place in which the Kohen who is to prepare the Paraduma, was detained was a place called it was Alpanei Habira, and it was Sophona Mizracha, Lishkas Beis Evan. This was a direction of the Beis HaMikdash in the northeast of the Beis HaMikdash. That's where the room was that the Paraduma Kohen was going to be detained in. So the Gemara asks, and here we go, if you want to pick up the Gemara on your page, it's almost exactly halfway down from the top of the Omid, of the block. And we'll start, Maishanot Sophona. The first words on the line are Lizalzalu, Lizalzalu. That's, you want to count from the top, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 12, 13, 14, 15, 16, 17. It's 19 or 20 lines down from the top, from the words Yomim Kodem, Shavas Yomim Kodem Yom Kippurim, Lizalzlu Behen Bar. You can imagine there's a full stop just before Mai Shana, and we're reached Mai Shana. Mai Shana Tzavona Mizracha. The Gemara asks over here, why is it? And we're going back again, not to our case of Yom Kippur, but to the Porah preparation, that this Kohen is detained in a room which needs to be at the northeast of the Beis HaMikdash. Why northeast rather than southwest or any other position on the compass? So the Gemara answers, Kivan de Chatos he. The answer is that since the Paraduma is referred to in the Psukim as a Chatos, if you look at Parshas Chukas, which describes the preparation of the Paraduma, it describes it as Lemei Nido Chatos he, that the Paraduma is referred to as a Chatos, which is a sin offering. Now, this is an important observation, because the Paraduma is not a sin offering. There's a whole category of korbanos called chatos, which you bring if you unwittingly or not deliberately violate a Torah law. Then you bring a sin offering as a kapara. But the Paraduma is not brought to be mechaper for any averot. It's being brought to purify someone who's contracted tumat meis. So we should not think of it normally in the terms of being a chatos. It is not a kapara for any sin. However, the Torah refers to it as a chatos. If you like, the Torah's text calls it a chatos. And since the Torah is called as a chatos, the chatos te'una tzefona, and we know that all the preparation of our korban chatos, a normal chatos, korban chatos, and we read about this also in Masechet Sukkah just a few weeks ago, was in the north. Uksiv bar, and he adds an extra bit. Well, I'll explain this to you after we've read the Gemara text here. Uksiv bar, and it says in relation to the Paraduma as well, where is it prepared? El nochach pnei ohel moed. The Kohen who's burning the Paraduma on Har HaZeisim, he looks towards the direction of the Ohel Moed. We'll see what that means in a moment. Takina l'Rabbanon, for that reason, the Rabbanon, the Chachomim, instituted Lelishka Sophona Mizracha, that the room, the chamber in which the Kohen preparing the Paraduma would be housed would be B'Tzavona Mizracha at the northeast, in order that he should recognize what his duties are going to involve. What does all this mean? In fact, over here, the Gemara has made this answer overly complicated. So what I'll do is I'll just share a screen with you. I hope it'll help simplify an overcomplicated text. We're back again here with my sharing the screen with a picture, famous picture. Let me just scroll up, of the makeup of the Beis HaMikdash. If you like, this isn't at the time of Bai Sheni. Here again is a helicopter's view of this great big building, which was very, very high. The Heichal, here's the Kodesh, here's the Kodesh Kedoshim, the Aron would have been in here. Here are the steps going into the Heichal, the main beautiful building. Here's the Mizbeach, the altar. There's a ramp on the altar. Now look at the directions. This is the west. This is the east. On the right is the east. And therefore, if you know what the compass looks like, up the top is north and down below is south. So if I'm looking for the north northeast of the Azor, of the Beis Hamikdash compound, I'm looking here. This is the Ezras Noshim. We're really looking in this square, and the northeast here will be north and in the easterly direction, as you see east, around here where you have all those little rings. So that's the northeast. And the chamber was over there. Somewhere over here was the chamber for the Beis HaMikdash, in the Beis HaMikdash that the Cohen preparing the Paraduma would be housed, actually not very far, probably, from the Nishkas Evan. This is according to one point of view, by the way, there's a machlokas, but I'm trying to keep these things simple. Why should it be over here? The Gemara gave us two reasons why it should be in the northeast rather than, shall we say, the southwest. Why should it be on the northeast? One, the Gemara said that it was in the north that the Korban Chatos is prepared. This is the north. This whole area over here is the north. So, right, so northeast is north. And this is the Chatos preparation position because the Paraduma is referred to as a Chatos. So therefore we want to ensure, if you like, the Kohen is in place, in situ, in a place which is, if you like, consistent with the terminology Chatos, even though he's not going to prepare his Paraduma anywhere here at all. It's just that the Paraduma is called a Chatos, and therefore he's going to be housed in this position. Where is he going to prepare it? He's going to prepare it on the Har HaZeisim. Where's the Har HaZeisim? The Har HaZeisim is way to the right. Yes, if we just make this a lot smaller. 1 second, I've given you another page. I want to do this. Har HaZeisim is way in the grey part over here. It's off the screen on the right. That's where the Har HaZeisim is, hundreds and hundreds of yards away. So he's standing way on the right of the Har HaZeisim, and he's burning the Paraduma, and he's supposed to look down. When he looks down, he has a lovely view of the Beis HaMikdash below him. So in his landscape, he sees through some open gates here in the Ezras Noshim, and he sees over here all the way through to the Heichal and the Beis HaMikdash. And since he's in the east, when he's preparing it, we also want to make his little chamber in the east as well. So we make it northeast because northeast is relevant in two ways to the Paraduma. It's called a Chatos, so therefore we want to house him in the north. The Kohen, when he prepares the Chatos, is going to be gazing down from the east, and therefore we place the chamber in the east. I'm not sure I'm terribly convinced where he has to be placed in the Beis HaMikdash should be congruent with where other things are happening. For example, this is not really a Chatos, and he will really be outside. But nevertheless, that's the reason giving. There's a connection between north and east for the Paraduma, so we place him in the northeast position as well. Remember, he's up on the top of the hill, way to the right on the Har HaZeisim. This is the only form of holy ritual that takes place outside the Beis HaMikdash, the preparation of the Paraduma. He's on top of the hill and he's looking down from the Mount of Olives. Okay, let's just stop sharing a minute. Okay, the Gemara also says, my bira, going back to the Gemara, the Mishnah that we quoted from Porah said that his place was in the bira. And here there's a machlokus. The bira, Shushan Habira. What does Shushan Habira mean? Shushan, the city, which is Habira, which really means the palace city, if you like, the capital. That's what the bira really means. But a bira can also mean a tower or something like that. It can mean a palace, a tower, a citadel. You can translate it the way you want. It's one of those strange words, not used very often. And the Mishnah in Porah said that his room was housed in the bira. But I showed you his room towards those rings in the Beis HaMikdash. So let's have a look and see where he was. And we will find it's not so clear. So Amar Rabba Bar Chana, Amar Rabbi Yochanan. So Rabba Bar Chana said to Rabbi Yochanan, you want to know what the bira is? Mokom hayo bahar habayis ubira shmo. The bira is some construction on the Har HaBayis. If I just share again, just so you understand what's going on over here, this is the disputing view. This is the disputing view. According to Rabbi Yochanan, the bira isn't here at all where I showed you it was. It isn't anywhere here in the northeast of the Beis HaMikdash itself. It is on the Har HaBayis northeast. So the Har HaBayis is a large area surrounding the diagram I show you over here, because the Beis HaMikdash did not take up the whole of the platform of the mount of the Har HaBayit. It only took up part. And therefore, when Rav Yochanan says that his bira was in the northeast, he means on the northeast of the Har HaBayis, which probably means somewhere over here, if you like, if this is the Har HaBayis, and not necessarily, in other words, north and east, but not in the northeast section of the Beis HaMikdash compound. So that's the opinion of Rabbi Yochanan. And Reish Lakish Amar Kol HaMikdash Kulu Koru Bira. I don't believe what you're saying, that it was another place on the Har HaBayis that was called Bira. This whole structure here is called Bira, and therefore the northeast of the Bira, well, essentially this structure, this left-hand square, so therefore this is the northeast of the Bira, because the Beis HaMikdash is called Bira. You don't have to look for a place called Bira outside the Beis HaMikdash. It's in the Beis HaMikdash itself. And how do I know that the Beis HaMikdash itself is called Bira? Why isn't it called Mikdash? Why is it called, why are Chazal referring it to Bira? So he quotes Shenema. We have a posuk in Divrei Hayomim, which talks about David, who is saying that his son, King David, Shlomo, will build a Beis HaMikdash. So what does David say in relation to the Beis HaMikdash, which will be built by his son Shlomo? David HaMelech wasn't allowed to build the Beis HaMikdash. He just bought the plot and he was allowed to design it, so to speak, but he himself didn't build it. It was his son Shlomo who built it. So it says in the Pasuk, as the Gemara now quotes, Habira asher hachinosi. The Bira, the Mikdash, Asher Chinosi, which I have prepared. I haven't made it yet, but my son Shlomo is going to make it. He'll make it according to the plans I've drawn up, so to speak. And it says, Habira Asher Chinosi. What is Shlomo going to build? He's not going to build a Har HaBayis. We're not talking about the Har HaBayis. The Bira here means the very building of the Beis HaMikdash itself. This is Reish Lakish. So we have a machlokus as to where this Cohen was to be housed, the Kohen who was going to prepare the ashes of the Parah Aduma. Is he to be housed in the Beis HaMikdash proper, because that's what it means by Bira, or is he going to be housed somewhere in the Har HaBayis in some construction there, which is called Bira? Okay, all this has been very much a tangent dealing with Parah Aduma. So we've become experts on the Parah Aduma, as the Gemara will do. Sometimes tangents in the Gemara go on for 8 weeks of discussion for us, for 3 or 4 daf of Gemara. We got over that actually relatively quickly. But now the Gemara is going to get to the more substantial issue, which is the separation period of 7 days, which seems like a good idea, but where does it come from? That's what the Gemara wants to know. We are going to look for an origin, a serious origin, to the requirement for a Kohen to have 7 days of preparation, either the Kohen Gadol before Yom Kippur, or the Kohen who's going to prepare the Parah Aduma. Nowhere in the Pesukim relating to either of these two mitzvot, Parah Aduma or Yom Kippur, does it say that the Kohen needs to be separated for a period. So let's see where it comes from. That's the Gemara's next question. Minohani mili, where does this halacha, where do the halachas come from of separation for both of these mitzvahs? The mitzvah of Parah Aduma, which is what the Gemara brought, and also our Mishnah, our very Mishnah that we're interested in for Yom Kippur. So Amar Rabbi Minyomi Bal Chilkiah, Amar Rabbi Mechasya Bar Idi, Amar Rabbi Yochanan. Here we're a nice little trail of Amarah saying it in the name, a late Amarah saying in the name of an early Amarah saying in the name of Rabbi Yochanan, one of the earliest. So we have, B'Shem Omro, right? We see as much as possible Chazal in the Gemara like to preserve the chain of tradition from which certain halachas or certain principles have been learned. Even, they might well, we could have had Rabbi Minyomi Bar Chilkiah saying, but that wouldn't have been good enough, because he was not saying it for himself. He was saying it in the name of Rabbi Mechasya. He'd learned it from Rabbi Chasya, and Rabbi Mechasya had a tradition that he'd learned it from Rabbi Yochanan. So we keep the trail going. Wonderful. You see, you have these digital links that take you right back to the very origin of a statement. We learn it from this. Omakra. We look at the posuk, and this is a posuk in relation to another din. We're going to have quite a handful of dinim over here, which interact with each other as we learn from one to the other. Omikra, the Pasuk says in, I think it's Shemini, it says, Ka'asher osa bayom hazeh, tiva Hashem la'asos lechaper aleichem. Let's just translate. As he did on this day, Hashem commanded to do, to atone for you. What is this talking about? Over here, we're not dealing with Yom Kippurim. We're not dealing with Parah Adumah. Those are both the cases where we want to know what was the origin of the 7-day separation period. We're now going to bring a verse which tells you that there is a 7-day separation period for another halacha. That's a halacha that doesn't actually apply anymore, but it refers to the inauguration of the Mishkan in the Midbar. It's in the Chumash, when the Mishkan was inaugurated. So I'm going to share my screen with you, and we'll see the psukim again and try and work out what the Gemara is saying. Okay. It's called the Miluim. Now, the Miluim here isn't the same as the Miluim in terms of the regular army service in Sahal. Miluim really means inauguration, dedication. Before the Beis HaMikdash was usable, it went through an inauguration period. And that inauguration period was a 7-day period, which lasted from the 23rd of Adar until Rosh Chodesh Nisan. And only in Rosh Chodesh Nisan of the 2nd year after they came out of Mitzrayim was the Mishkan in use. It was Hukam HaMishkan. It was totally set up. But there was a 7-day period which was called the Miluim, the inauguration period, like a Sheva Brachot period, except Sheva Brachos is usually after marriage rather than before. So this is a 7-day inauguration period. And this would prepare the Kohanim ritually to be able to bring Korbanot. Before that 7-day period was over, even if the Mishkan was up, it was unusable. Okay, where do we learn this from? And here's the quote. Umid Pesach Ohel Moed. This refers to the Kohanim from the entrance of the tent of meeting, Ohel Moed, if you like, at the beginning of the Mishkan, the entrance of the Mishkan, Lo Seitzeu Shivas Yomim. The Kohanim may not leave, if you like, the Ohel Moed during these 7 days, during 7 days. Ad yom la'os yemei miluechem. You see the word miluim come from here. I'd say he translate that until the day that your period of ordination is completed. Ki shivas yomim yemaleis yetachem. For your ordination will require 7 days. I like the translation here, ordination, inauguration. It's the official coming into authority of the Kohanim. 7 days prior to that, they were separated. So there's a 7-day period over here, although it's in relation not to the Parah Adumah and not to Yom Kippurim, but to the time in which the Mishkan would first become usable. And the Pasuk then goes on to say, and this is a key Pasuk, Ka'asher osa bayom hazeh, as he did today, Tziva Hashem la'asos lachaper aleichem. Hashem has commanded you lachaper aleichem. And the Gemara is going to use this posuk in a strange way to extrapolate the 7-day separation period for the Miluim, which is explicit here, to also apply to Yom Kippur and Parah Adumah. This will be the origin for Yom Kippur and Parah Adumah, for 7 days. So let's go back to the Gemara and see how it's done. So there says the Gemara, La Asos. I've deliberately recolored, if you like, on the screen. La Asos and La Chaper Alechem are going to be expounded as drashot by Chazal for a special purpose. Not simply just to say to do and to atone for you. I mean, it's not necessary to say that. So la'asos, says the Rabbi Yochanan, he says elu ma'asei para. I'm just reading from the Gemara. When it says la'asos, it's referring to Parah Adumah. Surprise, surprise. And lechaper aleichem, when it says to atone for yourself, Elo Maaseh Yom HaKippurim. That is referring to Yom Kippur. In other words, the Gemara is learning these psukim in a strange way. The posuk itself, or if you like, this block of psukim, deals not with Yom Kippur, not with Paraduma, but with a 7-day inauguration period. However, in the second verse that deals with the 7-day inauguration period, the Gemara is learning something additional, because it says over here, as he did on this day. In other words, as he's done on this day being the day in the posuk, which is the Miluim, the inauguration period for the Mishkan. Tziva Hashem la'asos l'chaper lechem. Hashem has, if you like, I put the word in, also commanded. We're going to change topic here. La'asos, that you should do the same thing for the Para Aduma. La'asos refers to the Para Aduma. L'chaper lechem refers to Yom Kippur. Just as there is a 7-day period of separation for the Miluim, also Tziva Hashem, that there should be a 7-day period la'asos for the Paraduma and l'chaper lechem for Yom Kippurim. Now, this is not such an easy drasha. Many drashot are not so easy. That's why we learn Talmud in Technicolor, because we try and work out how Chazal saw what they saw in a verse when it's not there explicitly. Where does it say over here that la'asos has anything to do with Paraduma? Where do Chazal extrapolate to Paraduma? And where does it say anywhere in l'chaper aleichem? That's referring to Yom Kippur. Maybe this is all talking about the Miluim. We're in a posuk to do with the Miluim, the inauguration of the Mishkan. These verses can just be taken literally to say Hashem has commanded you to do these things as an atonement on the inauguration of the Mishkan. But that's not the way Chazal see it. Chazal are saying there's additional clues in this verse that take us outside the area of the inauguration for us to apply the 7-day separation period to 2 other halachot, the halacha of preparation of Paraduma and also to that of Yom Kippur, to say that the 7-day separation period is needed for those 2 halachot also. Now, the l'chaper aleichem actually seems much clearer. When does one normally atone? That's Yom Kippurim. So you could well give this particular drasha top marks. Yeah, it says l'chaper aleichem. So therefore, I will extrapolate from inauguration to Yom Kippur because this is l'chaper aleichem. So I should also apply the 7-day separation period to a day when there is kapara. When is that? Yom Kippur. Yes, very satisfactory. But where do you see any allusion to Para Aduma in the word la'asos? La'asos could be anything. La'asos to make a cup of tea. Maybe there should be a 7-day separation period before you make a cup of tea. I mean, how do you know this is referring to Para Aduma? So we'll have to look further to see. The Gemara itself is going to try and flesh this out. We are learning the word la'asos to teach us that 7-day separation period applies for Paraduma, and l'chaper aleichem to teach us that separation period applies for Yom Kippur. And the more mysterious one is la'asos. But this is the drasha that the Gemara wishes us to learn, if we were satisfied with it, that we learn out the need for a 7-day separation period for Yom Kippur, before Yom Kippur, for the Kohen Gadol and for the Kohen preparing the Paraduma from the posuk that deals with Miluim, the inauguration period for the Kohanim, where the 7-day separation period is dealt with explicitly in the verse. So we know that because it's actually within the verse. So the Gemara goes on to ask a question with this drasha, which we found a bit problematic anyway. The Gemara is saying, look, I'm not sure I think your drasha over here is very convincing. And if you are not convinced, the Gemara is with you on that. I understand that this posuk in general can't be said to be talking about Paraduma because it says l'chaper aleichem. Because it l'chaper ksiv, upora lav bas kaporahi. If it says l'chaper aleichem, there certainly has to be an element of Yom Kippur over here, because the Porah Duma is never brought as a kapora. The Porah Duma is brought as part of a tahara, a purification ceremony. So certainly, because the Pasuk says L'chaper Aleichem, there has to be an element in which we learn out Yom Kippur here. We can't say Yom Kippur is not being referred to in the Pasuk. So we agree Yom Kippur is to be found in the Pasuk through these two words. But what about Porah Duma? Where do you find it? That's what the Gemara now says. I don't see anything over here in the words la'asos to suggest that there is an extension for 7 days to Porah Duma. Where does la'asos tie up with Porah Duma? And therefore, suggests the Gemara, maybe this whole verse is only this whole expression, la'asos l'chaper aleichem, is only coming to teach you to extend the 7-day separation period to Yom Kippur. Maybe there is no din of 7 days separation prior to Porah Duma. I know we learnt it in the Mishnah, but where do I see it in the Pasuk? If I read this Pasuk and I'm going to make a drasha, I would only make the drasha to extend to the din of Yom Kippurim, because it says L'chaper Aleichem. I do not see clues in the verse that tell me that I should also extend that 7-day separation period to the din of Porah Duma. So really, I shouldn't know more than 2 7-day separation periods, the Miluim and Yom Kippur. I should not know anything about Porah Duma from this verse. So the Gemara has been critical of trying to interpret this verse also to include the din of Porah Duma. It doesn't seem to come through the words. That's what the Gemara is saying over here. So the Gemara here, in answering it, sort of starts to change tack. And as we do so, we're going to get into a very interesting topic. It becomes a bit technical, but nevertheless one which I think is very important, the topic of Gezerah Shava, where you find words which are parallel in 2 different halachot. And Gezerah Shava is one of the Shlosh Esrei Midrash HaTorah Dreshes Pen, one of the 13 hermeneutical principles by which our sages learn out information which is not apparent in the text of the Torah. It's part of the data mining that Chazal do to try and extract more information. Let's see how that works. The Omri, Yalef, says the Gemara, we actually are learning Tziva, a Gezerah Shava of the word Tziva. Where does it say Tziva? Let's have a look. A new Chidush. Tziva Hashem. Hashem has commanded. And here it says Tziva Hashem la'asos. Here in this din of Miluim, remember, this is the 7-day inauguration period. The verse origin is related to the 7-day inauguration period. And also, Ksiv Hosom, it says in relation to the Porah Aduma, and these are the first the words in Parshas Chukas. Zos Chukas HaTorah Asher Tziva Hashem Lemor. We found a parallel keyword structure between here the din of the inauguration period, where it says Tziva Hashem, and also it says Zos Chukas HaTorah, referring to Porah Aduma, where it says Tziva Hashem. So what's the Gezerah Shava? We're going to make a Gezerah Shava. Ma lahalom Porah. In Chukas, where it talks about the Porah Duma, it associates the words Tziva Hashem with a Porah Duma. So Avkan. So here, where it says Tziva Hashem la'asos, Avkan lePorah, we say that these words here are referring to Porah because of the Gezerah Shava of Tziva Hashem. So Uma Kan Prisha, and since this pasuk is talking about the need for 7-day separation, Aflahalon Prisha, therefore we learn because of the parallel to say this is Tziva Hashem is in Porah Duma, that Porah Duma also needs a 7-day preparation. So it's coming through a Gezerah Shava. Let's understand this again properly. What are we saying? We have a Gezerah Shava between 2 separate halachot. What is a Gezerah Shava normally for? A Gezerah Shava is normally to allow us to extract information from one source text in the Torah and apply it to another source text, maybe in a completely different area of halacha. Why do we want to do that? Because, as we know, in some places the Torah is rich with details. In other places, the Torah is very sparing with details on another halacha. And we need to fill in the gaps of the detail in a particular halacha because it's not there. So if there is a key word in between those two different texts, text A and text B, and those key words obey various criteria, I won't get into those in detail, we can read across and we can say the Torah is intimating to us to make a comparison between these two different areas of halacha. That's what Gzeira Shava does. It's a signal to us that we should read across some of the details in one area of text in the Chumash to that of another area. So all of a sudden we can fill in certain details we didn't have. And that exchange of information can go both ways. If you have one text, one posuk, shall we say, posuk A, and you have another posuk somewhere else in the Chumash, posuk B, and you can find a similar key word between them or key phrase, then you can read across from A to B. In other words, you can extract some of the details from halacha A into halacha B, and conversely, you can extract some of the details from halacha B into halacha A. It's wonderful, and all of a sudden, you've gained information that isn't in the basic Torah Shebiksav itself. Torah Shebal Peh, through the Gzeira Shava, has allowed us to fill in gaps. It's all based on the similarity of words in between. There are a lot of requirements before one's allowed to do it. But the Gemara wants to say over here that since it says Sivo Hashem here in the Miluim, where this posuk of inauguration, and you require a 7 days preparation period, since it says Sivo Hashem also in the Parah Aduma, then the person preparing the Parah Aduma also has to go through a 7 day separation period. Even though in the posuk dealing with the preparation of Parah Aduma, which is quite detailed in Chukas, it makes no mention of a 7 day separation period. You can read across through this Gzeira Shava from the inauguration of the Mishkan, simply because of the parallel in Lashon Tziva Hashem between that of the inauguration and that of the Parah Aduma. Now, the Gemara, normally there are certain criteria before you can make a Gzeira Shava. I mean, if I find Vayoma Hashem, which you find about 8,000 times in the Chumash, in 8,000 different verses, does that mean we've got 8,000 occasions for reading across the details from one to the other? It would be absolutely mad and chaotic if that were the case. So, before you can state something to be a Gzeira Shava, it has to satisfy certain requirements as to why those words are there. Is there a reason for those words not to be there? And if they're there, therefore, do they raise some sort of flag and signal that we should deal with them seriously? So there are requirements before a Gzeira Shava can be made. And the second thing is, a Gzeira Shava needs a pedigree. It needs yichus. What the Gemara says, it needs a Masoros. It needs some sort of tradition. In other words, simply because I, as an observer in the 21st century, see, oh, it says Sivar Hashem here, and then I were to find in the Posuk with Parah Aduma, it says Sivar Hashem, I'm not allowed to say I found a Gzeira Shava. I'm not qualified to say I've found a Gzeira Shava. I have, of course, found a word equivalent, but it doesn't mean it's significant. In order for it to be taken seriously and significant, there has to be a tradition through qualified sources that this equivalence of phrase is significant. Otherwise, I might just well throw it away. I'm not allowed to invent my own Gzeira Shava. Even though it seems I have the material for it, I'm not allowed to do so. So it has to have pedigree. It has to have a rabbinic Masoros to it, and not just me picking it off the Chumash. So that reduces the scope for Gzeira Shava, which would otherwise be almost infinite. You could cross over phrases and similar words almost everywhere, and there would be chaos. Anybody could then make up their own halacha by saying, hey, I found a similar phrase, so I'm going to apply halacha here to a situation over there. Okay, now this is going to become a little bit relevant as we go on, as we discuss a little bit the question of Gezerah Shava. At this point, all the Gemara said to us is that we have a Gezerah Shava between Porah and this source posuk of Miluim. Since we know there is 7-day separation for the inauguration, there is also going to be the need for a 7-day period of separation for the Porah Duma. Tzivah Hashem is common to both those halachas, so therefore the 7-day separation will apply to both. So says the Gemara, though, hang on, and this is where maybe someone might have pointed this out before. Tzivah Hashem is itself quite a common phrase, is it not? How many times does the Torah say Tzivah Hashem? So over here, the Gemara is going to say, well, maybe I shouldn't be learning this Tzivah Hashem to Porah Duma at all. Where else does it say Tzivah Hashem? Well, I mean, you could go through the Chumash and see. If I'm going to look for a Gezerah Shava or Tzivah Hashem to other circumstances, I'll find more situations where the Torah is written Tzivah Hashem, not just the case of Porah Duma, to which I wish to extend this. You'll find other opportunities as well. What are those? The Gemara gives examples. Be'ema, Tzivah Yom Kippurim, and Yom Kippur itself. Why don't we say this whole Gezerah Shava is all dealing with Yom Kippur? Because what does it say in Yom Kippur and Dichsiv? It says in Posuk in relation to Yom Kippurim. We're on, by the way, on base Amud base. It says Dichsiv Vayas Kasher Tzivah Hashem es Moshe. When it came to Yom Kippur, it says Hashem did as Moshe. Moshe did as Hashem had commanded Moshe. So it says Tzivah Hashem, and this is referring also to Yom Kippur. In other words, you've got to go to Achrei Mos, and you'll see it's referring to Yom Kippur. So who says that the Gezerah Shava should be to Porah at all? You said Tzivah Hashem appears also in Porah, which means the 7-day separation period applies also to Porah. Maybe I shouldn't extend it to Porah. There's another example where it says Tzivah Hashem, that's Yom Kippur. And if I say it refers to Yom Kippur, it can't refer to Porah as well. It can only refer to one. You can't take a Gezerah Shava to apply to 20 places. So I've lost my extension to Porah Duma. You want to apply this extension to Porah Duma, but maybe I should only use this for Yom Kippur, where that Gezerah Shava also seems to apply. So the Gemara then gives a technical answer. This bit is a bit unusual. The Gemara says, you know, a Gezerah Shava has to satisfy a lot of criteria. You're right. It does look as though there's a possibility to say that Tzivah Hashem is a Gezerah Shava to Yom Kippur, and that we should learn Yom Kippur requires 7 days of separation, but not Porah. You could say that. But on the other hand, it would not be a very good Gezerah Shava. Why wouldn't it be a Gezerah Shava? It wouldn't be a satisfactory Gezerah Shava, because Donin Tzivah Dilifnei Asiyah, where it's second, Mitzivah Dilifnei Asiyah, Ve'ein Donin Tzivah Dela'acha Asiyah, Mitzivah Dilifnei Asiyah. Sounds a bit complicated. The Gemara is saying there wouldn't be a consistency between the two halachot, the one you want to learn from and the one you want to learn to. If really we should make a Gezerah Shava where there are the greatest parallels between, if you like, halacha A and halacha B, or where the circumstances in the Chumash are most similar. And he wants to say that when you make the Gezerah Shava, we want to make here, which is from Porah. In other words, we should say the Tzivah Hashem here, of course, is in source, it's dealing with the Miluim. And in Porah, Tzivah Hashem is the commandment of making the Porah Duma. In both cases, they were Lifnei Asiyah. You find that they relate to commandments before the ritual is carried out. This is where Hashem is instructing prior to the ritual, prior to the preparation of a Porah Duma, or prior to the inauguration period. So there's a good parallel between the Tzivah Hashems, if you like, because they are both in the context of a command given before the action is carried out. Whereas if you're going to say it refers to Yom Kippur, that the Tzivah Hashem, it refers to the Yom Kippur, it doesn't work so well, because the posuk that we're dealing with in Yom Kippur, where it says Vaya'as kasher tzivah Hashem, shows that there that the that tzivah, it's talking about Asher tzivah Hashem after the action. Vaya'as kasher tzivah Hashem. The posuk is saying now that he's prepared, he's done the action of Yom Kippur. He did it according to the instructions that Hashem commanded. But the posuk is relating to a period after the Asiyah. So therefore, it is less satisfactory to make a Gezerah Shavah where the one halacha is talking before the action and the other one's after the action. If you've got a choice, choose a Gezerah Shavah that gives you more consistency. We're beginning to see over here a pattern. A Gezerah Shavah needs to be, if you've got a choice of Gezerah Shavas you can make, let's say you have got a lot of Kasher Tzivah Hashem's, and you may even have a few traditions, you should go for the Gezerah Shavah, which is closest between the two phrases in terms of context, in terms of general circumstances of the two psukim. Don't go for something which is more distant, even though you might be able just about to justify it. We have a choice. You can see here that Torah Shabbal Peh was a little bit open-ended. We had alternatives for our Gezerah Shavah. We could have made a Gezerah Shavah from A to B, or from A to C, or A to D, or from B to C, or whatever. Rather, we should always use a source and destination texts which are as close together as possible, and we should eliminate those that are further away, which gives Chazal a lot of license in making a Gezerah Shavah. I think that should be something that becomes obvious over here, because the Gemara is saying, yes, you're right, I could have made a Gezerah Shavah to Yom Kippur, but it wouldn't have been such a satisfactory one. And where it's not satisfactory, I won't do it. So now the Gemara says, don't worry, it becomes a little bit easier in a moment. Ve'ema Siva de Carbonos Tichsiv Bayom Tzavoso is Bnei Yisrael. Oh, I've got another possibility then. There's another posuk which this might be a good Gezerah Shavah for. Again, not to Parah. I understand not to make it to Yom Kippur, but let me make it instead to Korbanos in general. There's a posuk that says, Bayom Tzavoso is Bnei Yisrael, on the day that he commanded Bnei Yisrael. So this is also referring to a commandment in advance of the action. And it says Bayom Tzavoso, and this is a general posuk about Karbonos. And if I did this, I'd come up with an extraordinary halacha, that if this is referring to general Karbonos, and I have a Gezerah Shavah from this Miluim requiring a 7-day separation period, that would mean that I extrapolate that also to Korbanos in general. Every Kohen, before he's allowed to offer up a korban, has to have 7 days of separation. Maybe not just during his inauguration, but every time. So he'd only be able to offer up a korban every 7 days. Offer up a set of korbanos on a day, then he needs to be separated for 7 days, and then he can offer up another korban. Very, very unusual and very ironic. Who says that this is not a Gezerah Shavah, teaching us that every Kohen, before he does his avodah on any korbanos, requires a 7-day separation period? It says, B'yom tzavoso es b'nei Yisrael. Not exactly a Gezerah Shavah, you should all be shouting, because B'yom tzavoso, on the day he commanded it, is not the same as the words tzivah Hashem. At this point, the Gemara seems to believe that since the root of tzav, tzadik vav, is common to both of them, that would have been another possibility. Don't learn the day and din of Parah Adumah requiring preparation. Learn the din of all korbanos on the Mizbeach requiring 7 days of preparation because of this Gezerah Shavah. So the Gemara says, to answer this, again, if I've got a choice of which Gezerah Shavah to make, I should rather go for one in which the two words that I'm making a Gezerah Shavah between are as close as possible in terms of their spelling. Donin tziva mitziva, ve'ein donin tzavoso mitziva. When we make a Gezerah Shavah, we've got a choice. Yes, we could have learnt to korbanos in general and said, well, it says in korbanos biyom tzavo, and tzavo is similar, at least in root, to tzivah Hashem. I got gzera shava, but my alternative I prefer to make is both working on the word tzivah. It says tzivah Hashem in Porah and tzivah Hashem here in the inauguration. That's exactly identical. So why should I choose a gezerah shava in which the word I want to choose for the other halacha is not the same? It's tzavo, when I have got material which is closer to the mark between the two. Tzivah Hashem, tzivah Hashem. And therefore I discard the possibility of a gezerah shava to the din of korbanos in general, because tzavo is further away from the mark to tzivah Hashem. And I use Porah instead. I will learn it to Porah itself. Okay. I think I'm going to stop over here. The Gemara's next words will my nafkamina, just to tell you what the Gemara is going to say over here. That takes us further. Maybe we'll look more generally Gzera Shavas next week. The Gemara is saying there is a famous Gzera Shava in which the Gzera Shava is learned from two words that are not at all identical. So why are you telling me that Yom Tzavo is not a good comparison to Tzivah? And the Gemara is going to bring this, it's a famous Gezerah Shava, between two phrases, V'shav HaKohen, Ubo HaKohen, two separate phrases. Is the word shav, which means he should go back, the same as Uba, which means he should come? Of course not. And yet there's a famous Gezerah Shav from Maseches Yevamos, which learns between the two. It learns a halacha from one to the other. And it says the word shav, is the same as the word ba. They're not from the same root at all. And the Gemara is going to therefore argue, and this is extraordinary argument, that it's possible to make a Gezerah Shava a keyword identification from which we will transfer a halacha from one text to another, even if the words are not identical. And that stretches the idea of a Gezerah Shava almost to breaking point. So we'll see a little bit about that next week. And we'll examine the Gezerah Shava a bit more closely. So I'm sorry about the technicality of this week's shiur, but that's how it is sometimes. I'm just going to stop recording.